Good evening, and you're on the smoking section with Steve Helfer and Paul Neff. Paul, move your chair up a little bit. I think we got to get a little bit higher here. Can you do that with that?
You mean like
just
vertically up?
Yes, vertically up.
Okay.
And Paul has joined me at the very last minute. And Paul, we want to look at the camera on our left, not the one on the right.
Okay.
Can you see the camera there?
Yeah, I'm largely going to be looking at you.
Okay, however, but when you're not looking at me,
Okay.
look at there. So, Paul, you've often spoken about people not obeying the anti-smoking restrictions in Europe, and we've really come upon a country that has really pushed back.
Oh, that's good news.
That is good news. It is Greece. Mm-hmm. And Emily recently did, and we showed it on this program here, she did a Skype interview with an Englishman who lives in Greece named Kevin, and he said Greece really didn't obey any of the anti-smoking laws.
Because they go against human nature, and they are unnatural, and...
Well, right, but unfortunately every other country in Europe, for the most part, and certainly in the United States.
Certainly in the United States, yes.
People seem to be complying.
Although I do see exceptions, and I always make a note of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I always make a note of any kind of real exception I see, but people still comply a lot, and I think that's a really bad sign that, because about 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, if you had told people that smoking would be forbidden in bars and forbidden in cafes and forbidden in parks, most people would say, well, there was no way they could enforce it. But unfortunately,
that is how we felt in the 90s.
But unfortunately, not only is it being has it been imposed, but there is a great deal of compliance.
Right. And yet there's this other current going on silently, unfortunately. We haven't been able to mobilize them to articulate what it is behind this. But like a lot of celebrities, there's every generation there are celebrities and I by celebrity I just mean someone who's well known,
Yes, right.
So it's kind of
evidently,
a reductionist term, but I mean people like Scarlett Johansson and others who are not only not ashamed to be seen smoking, but it's like part of their persona.
Well, evidently in Greece, the legislators smoke openly in the House.
That's terrific.
And recently, because Audrey Silk of New York City Clash posted an article, and they had a photo of the Deputy Health Minister, Pavlos Polakis, smoking during a press interview, and that was just great. The Deputy Health Minister smoking right on television.
That's terrific.
And but did you know that today is International Day Against Smoking?
No, I didn't notice.
And it's implemented by something called the European Network of Smoking and Tobacco Prevention. Mm-hmm. And so, this is very good news. And I tell you, when Emily was saying this with this gentleman from Greece, who is, again, I told you, a Brit, I kind of found it difficult to believe, but evidently, so maybe we'll see what happens,
Yeah, I mean, I've always felt that that they had reached, the anti-smoking movement, that is, had reached its peak. I mean, they have no more alarming facts to dig out. There's no way they can inflate the statistics to say that smoking is much more dangerous than we knew, because they've run the gamut.
You think so?
And they're even recycling old memes, like the idea that, well, you think it's cool, but it's not really cool.
Yeah.
It doesn't look good, and furthermore, it erodes, just conveniently happens to erode all your looks, your skin, your hair, your teeth, everything. So they have an answer for everything.
So at
But
this
I don't
point,
think
I don't think there's
everything
anything else they can wheel out, to indicate that smoking is even more harmful than they already have.
No, they can't. And what is really amazing is when you see people, young people, smoking without any sign of guilt or furtiveness or shame. In fact, they sort of flaunt it. You know, it's like as though, like in the old tradition,
Yeah.
you know, men and women. And I think that's remarkable. I don't know how they do it, but they do, and I'm glad.
Yeah, it's a good sign.
It's just
and,
that they have some social support. I mean, they couldn't be ridiculed and ostracized and opposed by all the non-smokers that they know.
Well, when I recently went hiking on Mount Washington, I was up in Tuckerman Ravine, and a couple of guys were smoking, and that was nice to see.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, last week I was walking by the Science Center, and there was a crowd of people, well dressed. They were there for some kind of function, and I saw these two young women talking, and I noticed that as they talked, smoke was streaming from their mouths, and it looked very pretty and very right.
Do you think it could? Do you think it could have been electronic cigarettes by any chance? Have you
No.
noticed electronic cigarettes?
I know the difference, you know, and no, it was real.
It seems to me that, for example, most of the people I see smoking electronic cigarettes are men. Have you noticed that? Women don't seem to be taking to electronic cigarettes the way
That's
men
interesting.
have.
I think cigarettes mean something special to women, you know.
Oh yeah.
Because, like for one thing, in countries where women are relatively recently emancipated, that's where smoking among women is the heaviest, you know, and so that suggests that there's something that the anti-faction does not want to examine. The fact that it has an importance. It's not just a hit of an addictive substance. It is a sartorial statement. It's a habit that you wear.
And it also is a way to keep your weight a little bit under control.
Yes.
I was at a party on, what was it, on Memorial Day, and most of the women were kind of, I guess, in their 50s and 60s, and a lot of them really were overweight.
Yeah.
Not that many of us smoked at the party, but those of us who did smoke, fortunately or luckily, weren't. It didn't seem to be as heavy as the other women, as the women who.
Yeah. Now I like women that like to eat and that maybe have are not exactly gone. But,
Not
you know,
skin and bones.
That right, and that smoke. I mean, both are like, to me, signify an appetite for life. You know, an appetite for living.
Yes, that's a good point.
On every level.
You know, rather it's good to live rather than just exist in a deprived way.
Yes.
You know, not eat this, not drink that, not smoke this, not smoke that. Now, you know, we were out, we had our first day tabling in Harvard Square, and that was Tuesday, right?
Right.
How did you think it went?
Well, we're off to a slow start, but now I'm trying to think of ways that
Well, we're only out there for an hour.
I know, and it was at a particular time of day.
And it was rather cold.
It was cold, too cold to sit still. Maybe when it gets to be more hanging out weather, will attract more attention. And I was thinking of ways that maybe I can put a little more vim into this thing. And what I want to do is artwork.
Oh, really?
And,
That's not a bad idea, yeah.
You know, they have on Facebook, there's smokers are beautiful, haters are ugly.
That's a Facebook, someone's Facebook page?
Yeah, and it's quite popular. And then there's the art of smoking. And all of them feature attractive photographs of people smoking.
Well, I mean, so you can work on that. That would be a good idea. I thought we did pretty well, and we had a number of people stop by, and there was this guy Tom who evinced some interest in coming to our meeting Saturday, and that other person who appeared to be a transgender seemed to be interested.
Right.
Do you want to show this to our audience if they can see it?
Well, yeah, sure. I want to do some artwork. I mean,
This you have it in your hand.
yes, yes, yeah. I think one problem for the antis is that smoking is intrinsically attractive.
Yes.
And well,
I don't know if anybody can really see it. Hold it up. No, hold it. Oh, let's see. I don't know. Yeah, maybe barely, but we don't have the overhead camera here anymore, Paul.
yeah.
And listen, don't try not to hit this.
No, I'm thinking maybe.
See this poster behind you?
Yes, I was thinking of maybe walking toward the camera with it.
Do you want to try that?
Sure.
But don't hit the poster behind you.
What is it? The big square thing?
To the left.
Right here.
That's it. No, it's not gonna. It's not gonna come out, Paul.
It's showing. See?
Well.
There we go.
Okay.
Now, I think most people find that sort of image attractive.
Yeah. Well,
In spite of themselves, maybe, but nevertheless. I remember one year.
Well, try not to hit the poster.
1 year on the cover of the Cambridge Chronicle, there was a cover story on how alarming the teenage smoking rate was.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a photo of a young girl lighting up, and that I've seen since. It's used a lot. And that photo seems to send the opposite message from the one that's intended, because it's so beautiful. You know, she looks like she's there's a blend of innocence and experience. It's very charming. I don't see how any normal person could respond to that in a negative way. I don't know if it's on purpose or not. I get the feeling that there's strong editorial policies against positive images of smoking or positive comments or even late comments. But sometimes I think that the arguments that the journalist advances will be so ridiculous that it's almost as though you're meant to refute them in your head.
Yeah.
And the other is visual images. This image of this girl was, I mean, if you were a girl, a 16-year-old girl, you'd want to smoke to look like that.
Well, right now, unfortunately, the teenage smoking rate is very low.
Well, it's understandable because the price is very high, and these things do change.
Yeah,
Faster.
the future is very difficult to predict.
But it is true, however, that every single generation seems to reproduce. A portion of each generation reproduces the smoking behavior and signification of the previous.
Yeah.
The same gestures, the same attitudes. Like if you Google smoking celebs, you'll find that just about any actress that you can think of who's good or not smokes.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean.
Well, and so, I was happy to see that you went to our Facebook page and indicated that you're coming to the meeting on Saturday.
Yeah, I am.
You went to our Facebook page and...
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
And I wrote something about it on my own wall.
I noticed that, yes. And do you think that guy Tom that we spoke to is going to show up at the meeting? Remember he spoke? Remember that guy? He was the guy who said we should organize a smoke-in.
And that's a nice idea, and nothing against Tom, but for example, I myself, I don't think I'm a very good figurehead for a movement. I think we need somebody more prepossessing, and I want to look for that person, and meanwhile write and do my artwork and do my best.
Right.
But
so you don't think we have a charismatic leader as yet?
Well, you're charismatic.
Well, yeah, maybe.
You have a great deal of charisma.
Well, thank you.
You brought me in, and actually, it was the best thing I could have done at that time in my life, was to get involved and to show a little bit of courage and stand up there and say what I believe.
Especially in
front of a bunch of people who are openly hostile.
And even on television.
And I have to say that, people are afraid of that. I have found, totally, overwhelmingly, it is worth it.
In what respect do you find it worthwhile?
There's a negative reaction that people anticipate in my case, it never came.
Right.
I found that it seemed like I had no respect.
Well,
From-
I think people, when you speak in a public hearing, especially when it's filled with a lot of anti-smoking operatives,
Yeah,
I think people have a certain amount of respect for you.
yes,
Even I think the anti-smoking operatives.
and especially, you know, the people that are on the fence or that are there quietly agreeing. You know, a lot of times they'll say, "Good job."
You know, now
Right on.
now you know, Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights is involved locally here, and we were able to, through the offices of Councillor McGovern, to get the city to start this pilot project with the sidewalk butlers, so that they
A
have
bit of re-norm there.
right. So we have a number of them have been placed in Central Square.
Right. Yeah.
But as I spoke to Councillor McGovern, we're not quite. I think there need to be community involvement, because I don't think they're really placed in as visible a way as they could be.
Right. Right.
Did you notice any coming over here?
No, I noticed over downtown in Government Center, I guess the JFK building
Yeah.
has an ashtray near it, and
Well, one of those, but not a sidewalk butler.
no.
Well, anyway, Cambridge Citizens for Smokers' Rights is going to be meeting. Councillor McGovern said we can meet with the Department of Public Works, because I think they need some input from the community, as it were.
Yeah,
And I think that's a positive thing.
very.
And also, I got a letter back from the Secretary of the Commonwealth, because I put in a Freedom of Information Act appeal,
Okay.
because the Middlesex District Attorney's Office is refusing to give me the official report of the 2016 fire that took place in Cambridge, which they had announced was caused by careless disposal of smoking materials.
Right, and you might want to mention that, you know, going way back, your experience, Michael McFadden's experience, is that they tend to give us the runaround on things like that.
Right, right. Well, particularly, you know, the public records law in Massachusetts is not as robust as it is in some other states. So there's been a lot of talk about that.
And I think smoking, like other issues, like globalization and things like that, they're supposed to be kind of protected from debate. One way or another, they're not up for debate.
Well, I don't know. Globalization's certainly up for a lot of debate, and it's certainly during the last election and in its aftermath. I mean, it seems like that's all people are talking about.
Mark Zuckerberg says nationalism versus globalization is the main problem facing the 21st century.
Well, so that would mean that there is certainly being discussed.
Yeah, it's skewed, of course. I mean, first of all, the plan, the idea was kind of in operation by the time people were really hearing.
Oh, right. Well, people didn't object to globalization until after globalization began,
They didn't,
which was a gradual.
you know, I don't think people were aware, like, for instance, that you heard of the book, The Non-Patriotic President?
I have not heard of that, no.
Clinton. They weren't aware that nationalism and patriotism and such were being so aggressively and so officially being phased out.
Well, I guess that's the big difference between what we call conservatives and liberals.
Unfortunately, and I don't think it's a good difference, because I don't see why liberalism should be synonymous with globalization. It's arguable that you know, control of the local area by outside speculators and investors, they are not going to have as much concern for that locality.
Yeah.
You know, and the world is made up of localities. You know, you start in the corner where you live, and make that better. And you're concerned about it because it's yours, it's your home. And like the idea the idea that home, soil is passé.
But to some degree, you know, when you have the amount of, let's say, social media like Facebook, you know, whereby there are, I think, 2 billion people are on Facebook, and they're all communicating with one another, and they could be in the four corners of the globe or the four corners of the United States. I mean, that is certainly a strong impetus, even though for globalization, right?
There's a lot of conversation against globalization among my Facebook
Right,
friends.
but at the same
From
time,
all over the world.
but by using Facebook, by using something which is so global, and where you're speaking to people who don't live, you know, who live thousands of miles from you, even if you're objecting to globalization, you're actually taking part in it.
Yeah, in a sense, but I mean, we do have an electronic network all over the world, and we don't live in a vacuum, none of us. And to say that you're a nationalist is not to say that for you the outside world does not exist,
Right.
Or that you don't have to relate to it in some way.
Well, now, Paul, you often...
I'm very encouraged by you know, my Facebook friends who are all over the political spectrum, who have great conversations on these subjects.
You know, Paul, you often talk about how artists and intellectuals like tobacco, and so I have a smoker of the week here, and do you find that smoking helps you when you're doing, let's say, writing, or when you are doing your artwork?
The things that help me, I don't necessarily recommend to other people.
Well,
I think the main thing that helps me really is to be in as good health as possible. But I have heard that for a lot of people, smoking facilitates the flow of words, you know?
Well, there was a man by the name of Compton Mackenzie who wrote a book called Sublime Tobacco. And he praised tobacco as being the handmaiden of literature. Now, this gentleman here...
I've heard that kind of thing a lot. And some of the writers, the alternative writers that I like, do pose with a cigarette.
Yes. Oh, it seems often that case. Well,
Alain Dubenois, for instance.
Oh, yeah. Especially in today's age, it's certainly a defiant pose.
Yes, it is.
This man is Richard Eberhart, and he died at the age of 101, and was a Pulitzer Prize-winning author of several dozen volumes of poetry.
Yeah.
And at the time of his death at 101, he was an emeritus professor at Dartmouth College, where he had taught for more than 50 years, or about 50 years. And when he was interviewed, in an interview, he said, quote, "My experience is that smoking is conducive to a meditative state of serenity and contemplation." Richard Eberhart, and here he living to be 101, and not only being a smoker, but actually praising tobacco as a something that was conducive to a meditative state of serenity and contemplation.
My great-grandfather on my father's side certainly did look serene and contemplative when he was smoking.
Did he smoke cigarettes or pipes? Or
cigarettes. And he lived to be almost 90.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was a nice presence, you know, to a child. You'd like to sit on his lap and stuff. And of course, no one thought twice about him smoking while we were sitting on his lap, which is good.
Right, of course, of course.
You know, and
well, as I've mentioned on this program many times, I remember sitting at the breakfast table with my father, and he would blow smoke rings for me and my sister.
yeah, my father did that for us too. Yeah, there was some of that in my family.
Was he a smoke ring blower?
Yes. Yes.
It's funny, you don't see too many women blow smoke rings, you know what I mean?
No, they're more into what they do, which I really like, is that snap inhale where they kind of, little flower kind of balloons between the lips and then it zips back in.
Well, do you ever, that's sometimes referred to as a French inhale. Do you ever French inhale?
That's where, no, the French is where you inhale it back through the nostrils, I think.
Yeah, and that's, I think, as I said
They call
before,
this a snap inhale.
and I think that comes from during the war, when tobacco was so precious. You know, France had very little tobacco, so that they wanted to make the most of every inhale. Well, listen,
It
Paul.
looks good. I remember when I was at the Algiers and it was first hitting
Well,
me.
we're running out of time. Let's just say goodbye to our guests, our viewers. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.